who's joining us all the way from New York. Gerard, this bill passed unanimously in the House, something that is difficult to see nowadays when it comes to Congress. What does that level of bipartisan support then signal about how the United States views the threats tied to Hamas, specifically after the October 7th massacre?
That level of bipartisan support sends a clear message that the United States stands united against Hamas, that we understand the terrorist group and its motivation and its ideology, and it is something that is harmful to the world and especially to the United States. It sends the message that the U.S. has an obligation to ensure that terrorists and those who support them cannot enter our country or gain legal status here. So this is really a monumental bill that was passed by the House. And this time, there were similar bills passed in previous Congresses, but this time with the Republican Senate, there's every indication that the Senate will also approve this, and this will move to President Trump's desk for signing into law.
So a strong message, that's for sure. But what about real world impact? What impact would this law have? And how is it actually going to be enforced?
The real world impact has a little bit to do with what we saw last week in the tragic assassination of two National Guard soldiers in Washington, D.C. by an Afghan national. This bill is meant to prevent something like that from happening in the future. We have been very lax in the United States in letting people in who should not be in, people who have connections to terrorist organizations or who support terrorism. And we want to make sure that we're not in a position to have another tragedy like in Washington, D.C., that we more properly screen and vet people, and if they're tied to terrorist groups, including Hamas, that they be deported or not let into the country to begin with.
Gerard, the bill targets anyone who materially supported or helped plan the October 7th attack, but I'm curious how broad that definition is in U.S. law. Could it face any legal challenges once it's actually implemented?
It can certainly face legal challenges when implemented. We have due process. So if someone is accused of providing material support to Hamas in connection with the October 7 attacks and faces deportation or exclusion, they will have the right to challenge that in court, as so many people who have been subjected to deportation have done. Ultimately, this is a national security issue, which is voted on by Congress. If it passes into law, it will send a signal to the courts that this is something that is so important that it's not just an executive order or executive action, but Congress passed a law about this. So it's more likely to withstand legal scrutiny than other types of action.
Gerard, in the bigger picture then, how does this legislation fit into the wider fight against rising anti-Semitism in the United States?
I think it sends the message that when we see the connection between Hamas and terrorism against Israel and rising anti-Semitism in the United States, we have to combat both at the same time. We cannot simply accept all this terrorist support that we're seeing on city streets across the United States when we know what that means. That means violence towards Jews, violence against the Jewish people, and that first we have to exclude terrorists from coming to America, but then we also have to crack down on anti-Semitism here that supports their horrible messaging. So that goes hand in hand, and the Justice Department is certainly doing its part as well.
A strong bipartisan message, that's for sure. Gerard Filitti, thank you so much for being with us on I-24 News today.